You know, originally I wasn't going to do this video because I thought, oh, Indiana Jones is so old, I don't think anyone's going to remember it. And then they announced that they were going to do another sequel with Harrison Ford as Indiana Jones. I'm still surprised Harrison Ford's still alive. I mean, look at that geezer. What artifact are you going for next? A pack of Werther's Originals? The original group couldn't meet because the DM was out of town, so the Star Wars campaign was on pause. However, George and his friend Steven talked about running a D&D campaign with some kind of historical World War II-ish setting. Harrison was really into this idea because he was really into like anthropology and history, and so he made this really cool archaeologist character. Of course, Harrison makes him a rogue because, like, of course it's Harrison. Everyone else kind of pushes off their character creation until they finally get to session 1, and it's Harrison and Steven, and no one else shows up. Either they cancel or they just ghost. The DM had this really cool ancient Incan temple prepared, but he doesn't think the campaign's gonna be happening anymore because no one showed up. The DM's about ready to just pack it up, but Harrison's really disappointed he didn't get to use this really cool character, and he's disappointed that he couldn't play in this cool setting. And so Steven's thinking, well, I don't want to let down Harrison, and I have this temple already prepared. I guess I can just run it. But Steven doesn't know how to run one-on-one D&D, so he decides, you know what, I'll just run it and I'll learn as I go. It can't get much worse from here. The first session is really just a practice run. It's the DM trying to figure out how one-on-one D&D works, if it's even possible. He doesn't make any modifications to the temple. He just kind of plops Indy down into this jungle with this dungeon that he has prepared, and he just kind of sits back and sees what Indy does. There were a lot of points that Indy could have easily just died, just fallen down a pit, get stabbed by a trap. But the DM just didn't want to instantly kill off Indy's character, but he also didn't want him to have no consequences, just get away with anything. So what he does is he puts Indy in a failing position, but gives him a chance to get himself out of it. There's moments where Indy fails a check and he could fall down a pit, but instead he barely catches himself and he has to pull himself back up. This becomes a lot more fun for the player because instead of just instantly failing, he's able to come up with solutions to problems that he got himself into. The DM, instead of just having Indy instantly fail, sees what he can do to instead just make the situation worse instead of just killing off Indy. This makes the game better because the DM gets to come up with cool cinematic situations to get Indy in, and then Indy gets to be heroic and smart by getting himself out of those situations. The only issue that comes up is that the DM forgot to modify the combat encounter that he had at the end of the dungeon, and so Indy has to use his quick thinking to unfortunately give up the idol he was going for, but he is able to run away. And at the end of the session, Indy's player feels cool because the character that he came up with became the main character, became a hero. And now the DM thinks it's possible to run D&D one-on-one. So what he does is he plans out a campaign. He reads Indy's backstory and he comes up with an adventure about the Lost Ark of the Covenant. He reasons, well, Indiana is an archaeologist, so I'll come up with an adventure for searching for lost artifacts. And there is no better artifact than finding the Lost Ark of the Covenant. And sure, Nazis are also after it, just to add in a ticking clock and a bad guy. Around when session 2 comes, the DM doesn't have the full adventure prepared, so in order to sort of stall Indy out, he comes up with this little bar encounter where he has to convince someone from his backstory to give him a medallion that he needs for the adventure. But then Indy fails all of his persuasion checks, and so the bartender from his backstory just says, come back tomorrow. But the DM wants to keep the plot moving forward, so he thinks, now's a good time to introduce the villains. And so begins the first real combat of the campaign. Indy is a rogue and he's not really good at just one-on-one fights, so he has to do a lot of ducking for cover. He has to work with the environment a lot. He has to come up with like more creative kills, like shooting the fireplace so that the firewood rolls over and lights the spilled alcohol on fire, lighting a guy on fire. There's a lot of that. Of course, the fight isn't going super well, so the DM decides that Marion can also kind of come in and help with the fight. He kind of improvises her as a drunken master monk kind of NPC. And with Marion's help, he ends up winning and getting the medallion, except the bar kind of burns down and the DM doesn't really know what to do with this NPC because now their bar's burned down and there's nowhere for her to go. So he's like, hey, if Marion helped Indy out in all those fights, Indy might need like a follower who can fight with him, and so I'll have Marion go with Indy on this adventure as like a sidekick. Also, after the bar fight, Indy decides to multi-class into fighter because that was a rough encounter. Now the third session is rolling around, and I feel like once you get to a third session in a D&D campaign, that is proof enough that the campaign is working. At least that's the case in this situation, because now we are in Cairo. This is around when the DM realizes that Marion can't be Indy's follower because that was supposed to be Sala, and so the DM has to come up with a way for Marion to not be in the adventure. So he has an ambush in the streets of Cairo, and it's this real dynamic chase encounter where Indy is taking on multiple bad guys at once. He's really putting that fighter multi-class into use, but unfortunately in the chaos he does lose Marion. Indy's really upset about this even through session 4 because he got really attached to Marion, and he kind of just wants to brute force his way through the campaign, but the DM subtly reminds him, hey, what about the medallion? You gotta follow that lead. And so Indy's like, yeah, I guess. With the research that Indy does and also succeeding super well on his stealth checks, he's able to make his way into the map room and find the real location of the Well of Souls where the Ark is buried. Indy gets himself some hirelings and he digs up the Well of Souls. The Well of Souls is a dungeon that the DM prepped when he read on Indy's character sheet that his flaw is that he's deathly afraid of snakes, so of course the DM made a dungeon that's filled with snakes. Once he gets through the snake room, he is able to find the Ark of the Covenant, and then unfortunately right after, the Nazis find them because they weren't exactly low-key about where they were digging. And so of course the Nazis find them, they take the Ark, but the DM doesn't want to just straight up have the Nazis kill or capture Indy, and so they just leave him in the Well of Lost Souls with no way of getting out, but of course there's a way of getting out. Oh, and also you can have Marion, I guess. End of session. Session 5 is mostly combat. Once Indy is able to find his way out of the dungeon, he goes on this rapid chase to find where the Ark is. At this point, the DM has mastered the art of one-on-one D&D combat. It's either a one-on-one duel with someone who's an enemy with equal combat power to Indy, or a lot of one-hittable goons. The DM uses the one-hittable goons whenever he wants Indy to feel like really powerful and heroic and like really capable, and then he throws in the one-on-one duels whenever he wants Indy to feel tense. This way Indy is able to feel very heroic but also mortal. Unfortunately, after session 5 they have to start wrapping up the campaign because the Star Wars campaign is going to get started up again soon. For the last session the DM puts on this grand finale where the Nazis get the Ark and capture Indy. Then they open the Ark and it melts their faces off and Indy gets to have like this heroic victory. If you're a DM and you think you can only run D&D for 4 to 6 players, you are sorely missing out. I have run D&D one-on-one, I have played D&D one-on-one, and it is consistently fun. You really get to focus on the player and make their character feel like the main character. If you run D&D right, the player will feel like their character is a hero in like the center of the world, which you kind of want to have them feel. Running one-on-one D&D would be really cool if you had like a roommate or a partner or someone who you like see consistently. Maybe you're at work together and you just want to have fun playing D&D. Just give it a try is what I recommend. Don't limit yourself to running D&D for like a group of people. See how it feels to run D&D for just one person. Hey there, 2 AM Nico here with some information for you. Also trying not to wake anyone up right now. I really want to finish this video, but there's a couple things that are pretty important that I want to mention. The most important thing is that there is now a Dice Brain Discord server. I made a Discord server. It's not just going to be some random Discord though. That's where I'm going to take all submissions for map review. Also, I'm going to be running one-shots on the server for just anyone who's available at the time. I'm thinking maybe twice a month on Roll20 so anyone can participate. Also, you can like message me on there and ask me questions and give me suggestions for videos and, you know, input and stuff like that. I also heavily updated my Patreon so that now all the tiers are the same price. It's just one tier now, and it's the minimum amount that I can set on Patreon. It's $3 a month, and with that $3 a month you get all the benefits of the previous Patreon tier. So not only is it going to be access to videos early, going to be access to all my scripts before I even start recording the video, but you also get access to an exclusive D&D campaign that I run for all the Patreon members that I run on Roll20. It's going to be different from the one-shots. It's a campaign that I run exclusively for my patrons. Also, you can directly message me on Patreon Patreon, which I think that's a pretty fun feature on Patreon. I also cut most of the prices for my merch on Teespring. I originally had the prices set for like the default prices that Teespring puts on for merch, but I felt like it was a little too much, so I dropped it down to like much lower than Teespring had it set. Aside from that, if you enjoyed the video, you should definitely like it, maybe even subscribe if this is your second or third video of mine that you're watching. I made a video similar to this a while ago that really blew up. It's basically this video, but it's Star Wars, and it talks about how to deal with problem players instead of running one-on-one D&D. Comment what movies you guys want me to do next. These are fun to make. Comment what movie you want me to put in the context of a D&D campaign. Aside from that, that's it. That's all. That's the video. Bye.